Humans satisfy their daily mineral requirements through consuming foods. Foods from plants and animals, and as well as water, contribute minerals to our diet. When we look at the minerals in our diet, we have to take a look at accessibility. And while it's a little easier to classify minerals because they're not characterized or subgrouped by behavior or their chemical structures, we do have to take a look at plant versus animal sources because the way that minerals exist in these two sources have a different accessibility to the human body. Minerals in foods can be measured by ashing techniques. We won't get too technical, but there's wet and dry ashing techniques. And in dry ashing techniques, we essentially incinerate all of the organic compounds in a food sample so that all that is left is the ash. And after you determine the amount of ash or inorganic minerals that are left, you can do single mineral analysis. And so these are the individual minerals that have been quantified and measured and listed in the database of the USDA database. So when we take a look at the minerals that are in animal foods, we see that they are protein bound. And so we've seen this little configuration before. It is the generic chemical structure for an amino acid. And so minerals bound to proteins in animal foods are more accessible to us because our digestive enzymes are going to work on those amino acids in those proteins. Now, in plant foods, on the other hand, minerals exist bound to chemical compounds that make them less accessible to our GI system. And we'll talk more about bioavailability in component 3, but I always like to start off with talking about how the nutrients exist in foods and why we have to look at the different food groups and how we're going to differentiate among the foods in those groups. So we'll take a slight look at plant versus animal mineral sources. We also get minerals in water, and in fact, the biggest mineral in our food, or the additive mineral sodium, is actually from water. So we derive the sodium that we use and sell in the containers from water sources. So definitely a significant source of minerals. So when we look at the minerals in fruit, the first few that came to my mind were bananas because of their rich source of potassium, but also juice because juice provides about the same amount per 8 ounces as does a whole medium banana. We also see that fruit juices are a pretty good source of added minerals, especially zinc and phosphorus, which are typically more concentrated in animal food sources. So we also get several minerals from vegetable sources, and particularly spinach. If we look at spinach like per calorie, it's kind of like a supplement itself. It's like a whole food natural supplement, like a superfood. Just in 100 calories of serving, you meet half your day's needs for a ton of dietary minerals. But the problem with the minerals that are in these leaves is that they're bound to a compound called oxalate. And oxalic acid or oxalate, whatever you want to call it, is bound to minerals so that they're inaccessible to us during digestion. So even though the spinach provides a lot of minerals and it's really high in iron, calcium, potassium, and even when higher when it's cooked, it also isn't very bioavailable. Now, we also take these minerals from these plant sources for people who are on vegan diets and extract them and use them as supplements. So we'll have, like, for instance, an algae calcium supplement that provides calcium. So we do get minerals from vegetables. They're just not the most high quality in terms of bioavailability. We also get minerals from vegetables. I always think of potassium when I think of potatoes because people always think of bananas, but potassium is really high in potatoes also. So a medium potato provides almost 1,000 milligrams of potassium, which satisfies your entire day's needs. We also get a pretty good dose of minerals in our snack foods that we make from vegetables, like chips. So we take and bake our fried chips like we talked about before, and we take the additive sodium, which is derived from extracting the sodium out of water, adding it to chloride, and we use it in food for a ton of reasons. But in the case of snack chips, for taste, we like that sodium taste. It's been a beloved ingredient since the beginning of mankind, or since the beginning of its discovery, I should say. But we take and we add salt to vegetables for lots of reasons, and it contributes lots. So in the case of chips, about an ounce will give you 150 milligrams of sodium, which is a pretty significant amount of your daily allowance. If we look at minerals in grain foods, so one neat thing that's happened in biotechnology is they've been able to gene edit so that grains develop more iron. So we do get iron in grain foods. For instance, rice bran. The exterior of rice, the casing, has so many minerals, satisfies like half of your daily values in just 100 calories. So it's like spinach in that way. But in grain seeds, it's bound to a chemical called phytate or phytic acid, and this makes it unavailable or inaccessible to our GI system. But they've been able to, with biotechnology, make grain foods that are higher in iron, and so that even though a proportion of it is bound to phytate, we still have a higher bioavailability because it's more concentrated in iron. So pretty neat biotechnological development. We also get a pretty good amount of minerals in things like oats. We get phosphorus. One of the biggest contributors of minerals in our grain foods are actually additives. So just like we talked about with vitamins, once we take a whole grain seed and we take off of it the bran and we take out of it the germ and all we have left is the endosperm, it leaves us with a feeling that we should add some nutrients back. So we added back minerals, particularly iron, and there are a few others. So we do get a good amount of minerals from enriched grains. We get the most from cereal. You can see here that the amounts are added in like 2 times the amount that we would need or our dietary guidelines, and lots of zinc. We get a little bit less from sources like bread and pasta, less than cereal, but again, you're going to get a lot, even though it's not as concentrated because we consume so many bread and grain products. It ends up being a significant source of dietary minerals. And this is a regulated thing as part of the Grain Fortification Act. We also, unfortunately, we extract that sodium out of water and make a sodium chloride or salt, and we add it to snacks and mixed meals. So in this instance, it shows a mixed meal with a pasta product, which ranges from 1,000 to 3,000 calories of sodium. Also, snack foods like pretzels are really high in sodium, 450 milligrams for 1 ounce. So pretzels are really high in the snack category. So we also get minerals in the nuts, seeds, beans, and legumes category from natural foods and from additives. We get it naturally in nuts, which contribute anywhere from 200 to 300 milligrams of potassium per 1 ounce serving. We also get a lot of added salt in nuts, particularly sunflower seeds, which have 1,500 milligrams, ouch, in only 1 small ounce serving. I still love sunflower seeds and still eat them regardless of the sodium. Same with Bloody Marys. You got to just skip some places. We also get calcium in legumes like soybeans, which have 500 milligrams in a half cup. We also see that foods like tofu have a pretty good dose, about 500 milligrams per half cup serving as well. We also see calcium in added like dairy alternatives that are made with soybeans and made with nuts and legumes. Things like the soy milk with added calcium to mimic what you would find in cow's milk. So it'll have that same level of dietary calcium that you would get from an 8 ounce serving of milk. Nuts like almonds are also a pretty good source of calcium, providing 75 milligrams in just 1 ounce. We also see that we take and we use minerals in additive products like peanut butter, which naturally has a small amount of minerals like calcium just from the peanuts, but also we fortify it with iron, for instance. And in this case, it's ferric or reduced iron, the kind that we would find in animal form. This kind is more bioavailable. We would also see iron in things like seeds, but it's going to be in the non-heme or the less available form, the ferrous. And we'll get more into the chemistry in section 3, but ferrous is non-reduced and ferric is reduced. So if you look at the ingredients list on foods, you'll see ferric acid. This is the reduced kind. You'll see it in foods like peanut butter as an additive, providing about 5.5 milligrams of iron, half your day's needs, girls, for just 2 tablespoons. You're also going to see a pretty good amount of non-heme or ferrous iron in things like beans. So particular type of beans are really high, but just like in the case with rice bran, they're bound often to phytates. But one good thing is that if you soak beans before you cook them, it helps free up some of the minerals from phytates so that they're available during digestion. We also see pretty good amount of minerals in meat, but they're different minerals. So naturally, meat, particularly shellfish in this case, is really concentrated in natural zinc and natural heme iron. So the heme iron is designated by the dark orange in case you didn't notice. The lighter color is the non-heme or plant form of iron. You can also see a really good amount coming from other forms of shellfish like crabs, really high in iron and zinc. Like I mentioned before in the vitamin section, organ meats are really high in minerals because that's where our body tends to store them, particularly spleen. So we'll learn in component 3 about how our body, the spleen recycles iron. And so of course, as we consume organ meat from animals, spleen, I don't know who eats that, but people do, it is high in dietary iron, 30 milligrams per small 3-ounce serving, in fact. We also see we also see that red meat is a good source of zinc. So unfortunately, processed meat are also a really high source of sodium, as well as mixed meals. And so slightly for different purposes. In the case of processed meat, we use salt to preserve them. So like a cured meat will be high in salt because the salt binds the free water. If we add salt to foods and it binds the free water, then the water is no longer available for the microbes to grow. And so this is safety. This prevents our foods from microbiological growth and from making us sick. So we add the salt, it binds up the water, microbes can't use the water to grow, and we don't get sick. So that's why we use salt in preserved and cured meats. We also use salt more commonly for taste reasons, which is why we see so much of it in things like burger meats and pizzas and even canned soups. In canned soup, there's actually a little of both. There's taste and there's the element of preservation. So we do get a lot of minerals from meats, both in natural and added formats. We also get a good amount of minerals from milk. In the foods that come in the milk group, such as yogurt. In just an 8-ounce serving of yogurt, you get about 450 milligrams, or half of your daily need for calcium. Also a good chunk of your day's needs for zinc and phosphorus. And yogurt's more concentrated in minerals because it's had the water taken out. It's been strained. So because of the water not being there, per 8 ounces, it's more concentrated. So milk only provides about 275, or about a quarter of your day's needs, milligrams of calcium, and about a quarter of your day's needs for phosphorus. We also get a lot of minerals in supplements and supplemental food products. For instance, we take dietary minerals like zinc. Zinc is a common one in certain populations for reasons we'll discuss in component 4. But dietary zinc comes oftentimes in the higher end brands chelated, which kind of means it's like mimicking the way you would find it in animal foods. It's bound to something that inhibits it being bound to binders in the intestines so that, absorption isn't inhibited. So in other words, it's bound to something so that it's more available in your gut. So it's not getting bound by things that will inhibit it from being absorbed. Oftentimes you'll see iron on the market with vitamin C. And the reason for this is because if you were listening close, plant iron is rich in ferrous iron. And the kind in animals is ferric. It's reduced. It's what our body does to it when we digest it and absorb it. And so by putting it with a vitamin C, which is ascorbic acid, hopefully you're with me on the chemistry, the acid reduces the ferrous iron to ferric iron. And so long story short, vitamin C enhances the absorption of iron. And we're going to talk more about that in component 3, but that's why you see iron most often with vitamin C, in case you were like, Oftentimes too, calcium and magnesium supplements come together. I think calcium might be one of the most popular dietary supplements on the market. People take calcium thinking they need it for stronger bones. And we'll talk more about this in later sections and in module 3 with certain populations. But essentially calcium supplements are best with magnesium to balance the absorption, and with vitamin D3, which if in the supplement world, in a perfect world, it helps with the absorption to add that vitamin D3. We also see natural or vegan sources of calcium. Again, these are coming from plant or vegetable extract like we talked about before with algae. Because most of the time the calcium that you see comes from animal sources. So if you're vegan and you're looking for a non-animal calcium source, you're going to want to look for a plant-based. So algae is a good source of that. So next time we will talk about how minerals are processed in the body to yield functional outcomes in sustaining human life and wellness. Thanks for listening.